The end of America's war in Vietnam saw a U.S. military in crisis, its morale all but depleted and its combat experience watered down by massive conscription. In the years that followed, the Pentagon focused on restoring America's military by returning to an all-volunteer force and addressing the problems of systemic drug abuse and a weak officer and non-commissioned officer corps. But just how well would America's military fare in a new conflict after years of neglect and waste? 20 years after Vietnam, the world would get to find out, as America's forces were immediately thrown into the last of the greatest tank battles of the 20th century. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographics Show. Today we're taking a look at the Battle of 73 Easting and how America proved once more it was a force to be reckoned with. The first Gulf War, or Operation Desert Shield and later Desert Storm, was the last major war of the 20th century. Fought between Iraq and a coalition of over 30 nations, it was ultimately a test not just of America's post-Vietnam War military, but of the UN as a world peacekeeping organization. With a potential to escalate to an all-out regional conflict between Arab states, failure to contain Iraq's hostility would have signaled to the world that even after decades of work, the UN was just as a lame duck at global peacekeeping as the League of Nations before it. But how did the war start? Iraq's belligerence towards Kuwait started toward the end of the Iran-Iraq War, a brutal conflict that lasted for 8 years. During the conflict, Kuwait and Saudi Arabia had backed Iraq financially, lending it billions of dollars. After the war, Iraq complained to the Arab League that its debts should be forgiven, as it had acted in the foreign policy interests of both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, who feared a growth of Iranian Shia influence amongst their own Shia populations. Iraq also raised concerns that both nations were producing more oil than the agreed-upon OPEC production limits, which was lowering the price of oil and costing Iraq billions. Lastly, Iraq specifically leveled charges against Kuwait that it was exploiting Iraqi natural resources by slant drilling across its northern border into Iraq's Rumelia oil field, in essence drilling diagonally to bypass national borders underground. If you've seen There Will Be Blood, it's the milkshake scene. Iraq did not like Kuwait drinking its milkshake one bit, and after the Arab League refused to act, Iraq, prompted by those and other grievances, launched a ground invasion of Kuwait, annexing the nation as a province of Iraq. For its part, the United States had long tried to broker a settlement in the region, but when Iraq linked its grievances with enforcing a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the U.S. refused to negotiate. Yet the United States remained reluctant to commit to military force, and ultimately it was Great Britain's Margaret Thatcher who reminded U.S. President George Bush Sr. about the consequences of inaction during Germany's hostilities prior to World War II, most famously by telling the U.S. president not to go wobbly. Wobbly President Bush would not go, and he immediately demanded an exit from Kuwait by Iraq. With Iraq poised to invade Saudi Arabia and seize control of over 65% of the world's oil-producing fields, the US and other allied nations had pre-deployed several 100,000 troops to Saudi Arabia as part of Operation Desert Shield. On the eve of war, these troops were reinforced with detachments from many NATO and non-NATO nations, including several Arab League nations, which President Bush had insisted on joining so the conflict would not be seen purely as West versus Arab. When Iraq refused to withdraw from Kuwait, the U.S. launched Operation Desert Storm on the 17th of January 1991, and the Battle of 73 Easting, the last great tank battle of the 20th century, soon followed. So who were the combatants, and what weapons was each side bringing to the fight? On the defending side was Iraq's fearsome Republican Guard, with the best training and equipment available to the Iraqi forces. The Republican Guard had been a force to be reckoned with during the Iran-Iraq War, responsible for some of Iraq's greatest victories. It was these elite soldiers who were dispatched to be the first to meet the American advance, and American war planners had estimated that defeating the Republican Guard forces would be a costly victory, even weakened as they were by weeks of aerial bombardment. The Republican Guard brought the vaunted Soviet-built T-72 main battle tank to the battle. A stalwart of Soviet design philosophy, the T-72 brought few innovations but was a solidly built and capable tank with a 125mm cannon, one 7.62mm and one 12.7mm machine gun. The T-72 may have been nearly 2 decades old, but it was still a formidable threat. Its cannon had exceptional accuracy and firing rate both, with up to 8 rounds a minute or 1.2 rounds if loaded manually, and an armor penetration of 590 to 630 millimeters at 2,000 meters. On the defensive, a T-72's frontal armor was 200 millimeters thick and capable of stopping a direct hit from an M1 Abrams from 2,000 meters away. The T-72's greatest weakness, however, was its lack of thermal vision systems and very poor night vision capabilities, which were a crippling deficiency in combat. Supporting its T-72 tanks were mechanized infantry deployed in Soviet-built BMP-1 infantry fighting vehicles, equipped with a 73mm semi-automatic cannon and a 7.2mm coaxial machine gun. BMPs not only protected squads of soldiers that rode inside of them, but were capable of taking on lightly armored vehicles themselves. Iraq's Republican Guard BMPs were also equipped with 9M14 and 9M113 Konkurs anti-tank wire-guided missiles, making them an agile threat to American tanks. Its 33mm thick armor plating provided protection from 7.62 armor-piercing rounds, and in a limited degree of fire, even 50 caliber machine gun fire. Like the T-72, however, Iraq's BMPs lacked thermal imaging capabilities or capable night vision sight factors, which would be decisive throughout the Gulf War. Facing off against Iraq's fearsome Republican Guard were elements of the U.S. Army's 7 Corps, to include the 1st through 3rd Armored Divisions and the 1st Infantry Division. Having seen no major action since the end of the Vietnam War, America's newly reminted all-volunteer army had some serious proving to do. Yet the U.S. Army had spent the last 2 decades drilling out its conscript force and restoring the capabilities and expertise of its leadership at the non-commissioned and commissioned levels, as well as engaging in routine exercises with NATO partners to stop a Soviet incursion through the Fulda Gap. The 7 Corps brought to bear the now legendary but as of then untested M1A2 Abrams. Designed in response to Soviet deployments of new main battle tanks, the M1A2 hosted a slew of revolutionary features, most notable of all being its Cha-Bum armor, of which it was the first tank deployed which incorporated it. Still a classified secret, Cha-Bum armor is a composite armor made up of steel plates layered with ceramic inserts and empty spaces meant to defeat anti-tank missiles and rounds by deflecting or redirecting explosive blasts and kinetic penetrators. It also featured layers of depleted uranium armor, making it one of the toughest fighting vehicles ever created. Its 120mm cannon is paired with a fire control computer which aids a gunner by calculating lead angle, ammunition type, and range to a target, a feature missing from Iraq's T-72s. The M1A2 also featured thermal and night vision imaging, as well as laser rangefinders, all features that would prove decisive in the deserts of Iraq. The 7 Corps infantry were supported by M2 Bradley fighting vehicles, armed with a 25mm automatic cannon with a firing rate of up to 300 rounds a minute, and a tow missile launcher. M2s were heads and shoulders above Iraq's BMPs in capabilities. Its aluminum armor is reinforced with laminate belts and steel skirts capable of stopping up to 50 caliber rounds, and even offering some protection from long-range tank fire. M2s are equipped with both thermal and night vision imaging, once more granting them a major advantage over Iraq's BMPs. In total, American forces numbered at around 4,000 versus the Republican Guard's 2,500 to 3,000 personnel. Yet with well-prepared defenses and boasting the 4th most powerful military in the world at the time, the advantage was with Iraqi forces, and American military planners expected heavy casualties in the ensuing action. The battle. On the 23rd of February, American forces swept into southern Iraq. A frontal push by armor was coordinated with a sweeping hook meant to encircle Iraqi forces from behind and attack from their flanks. The initial action saw stunning American victories, with 55 Iraqi tanks and 45 armored vehicles destroyed, along with hundreds of enemy KIA and the surrender of 865 prisoners. The next day, elements of the 7 Corps swept into northern Kuwait to sever Iraqi lines of communication and block the retreat of Iraqi forces. Another 50 enemy vehicles were destroyed, along with 1,700 prisoners captured. Moving to block further American advances and to secure their supply routes, Republican Guard forces took up positions along roadways, expecting an American attack to come along major roads, as they did not think anyone would be able to navigate the featureless desert. Unfortunately for Iraq, American forces were equipped with GPS, at the time a relatively new feature on armored vehicles, which allowed them to surprise Iraqi forces from unexpected avenues of attack, originating deep in the desert. On the 26th of February, 7 Corps' 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment was ordered to advance up to 70 Easting, an eastward measured distance designated by GPS, and engage the Republican Guard without becoming decisively engaged, so they could retain their maneuverability. At 16:07 p.m., E Troop of the 2 ACR, equipped with 9 Abrams, 12 Bradley fighting vehicles, and 220mm mortars, made first contact with the enemy. The main Republican Guard force had been entrenched near a village on the other side of a small rise in the terrain, in a reverse slope defense. Unaware of American GPS and expecting an attack to come along the main road, the Iraqi commander had dug in his 40 T-72s and 16 BMPs 1,000 yards from the ridge and created 2 engagement areas on the east side of the ridge and north and south of the village. He had also deployed several minefields which included both anti-personnel and anti-tank mines, and supported his armor with hundreds of infantry in hardened bunkers and trenches. A reserve force of 18 T-72s and more BMPs was held near his command post about 3,000 yards east. American forces arrived from out of the desert, not along the road as expected, catching the Iraqis completely by surprise, destroying a bunker serving as an observation post by running over it. E Troop's lead Bradley took 2 surrendering enemy soldiers prisoner. A second Bradley came under fire from Iraqi forces trying to reposition inside the village, and 9 Abrams returned fire with high explosive rounds. Given the clear to advance, E Troop reoriented so that its Abrams would lead the charge, with its Bradleys falling back to provide support. Cresting the rise north of the village, the Abrams made immediate contact with the T-72s entrenched there. Weather had been poor all day and visibility was very low, yet the Abrams were able to clearly see and target their T-72 opponents via their thermal sights, and with superior fire control and precision, eliminated all 8 T-72s they encountered in under a minute. Advancing past the wrecked tanks, E Troop immediately came under fire from more tanks, BMPs, and hundreds of infantry, all trying to reposition to meet the American attack. It was at this point that the E Troop had reached their limit of advance, 70 Easting, which they had been ordered not to exceed, with further orders to not become decisively engaged. This point in the battle, perhaps more so than the superior performance of American vehicles, proved to be decisive, as the commander of the E Troop, then Captain, today National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, disobeyed orders and commanded his troops to press the attack. This may seem like a court-martial-worthy offense, and certainly in many of the world's militaries it would be, except the US military has for a long time embraced a doctrine of flexibility, which not only allows but encourages its junior officers to execute orders as they see fit. Recognizing the high-speed pace of modern war and acknowledging the often superior situational awareness of junior commanders, who are often on the front lines, the U.S. military encourages its junior officers to take the initiative. This makes U.S. forces extremely flexible and is often a deciding factor in modern combat. Iraqi forces, on the other hand, operated by a heavy-handed top-down command structure that severely limited individual officers' abilities to react to quickly changing situations. This Soviet-style command structure was most notably evident during the coalition's air war, during which US-led airstrikes severed communication links in Iraq's extremely robust air defense forces and rendered them extremely ineffective. At 70 Easting that day, this difference between command styles and military doctrines would prove to be as decisive a force as the mighty Abrams. E Troop continued its advance toward the next ridgeline at the 73 Easting, on which were positioned the reserve force of 18 T-72 tanks. Still waiting for orders from their commander, the T-72s were caught completely unprepared, and the first of their numbers were destroyed from a range of about 1,000 yards. The rest of the vehicles attempted to mobilize and exit the staging area, but American Abrams quickly crested the ridge and destroyed all of them at close range. Now occupying the high ground that the Iraqi forces had planned on using to dominate the Americans, E Troop consolidated its position, but came under attack by a company-sized force of T-72s and BMPs. The Abrams, backed up by Bradley's firing TOW missiles, made quick work of the enemy force before they could close, eliminating the entire counterattack from long range. Meanwhile, E-Troops mortars suppressed enemy infantry, trying to mass further east, while artillery fire support rained down on other enemy positions. The Battle of 73 Easting lasted just over 23 minutes and resulted in an absolutely lopsided victory for American forces. Americans suffered 6 KIA and 19 wounded in bunker clearing operations by their infantry and 1 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. Iraqi forces suffered between 600 to 1,000 KIA and WIA, 1,300 prisoners taken, lost 160 tanks, 180 personnel carriers, 12 heavy artillery pieces, and several anti-aircraft artillery repositioned to serve as ground fire support. The battle proved the superiority of the Abrams tank design and the effectiveness of its classified Shabam armor, which had not seen combat yet. Despite taking numerous direct hits from T-72s, not a single American Abrams was rendered inoperable or required major repairs. In fact, the only Abrams to be lost during the entire Gulf War would be to friendly fire. The battle also proved the effectiveness of other as-of-yet unbattle-tested systems, such as military GPS and new-generation thermal and night vision equipment. It proved the technological edge of American forces and ensured that all tanks built worldwide would include thermal and night vision equipment as a mandatory feature. The Battle of 73 Easting also proved the superiority of American military doctrine over Soviet doctrine. E-Troops' quick thinking and disobeying of previous orders had seized the advantage and prevented Iraqi forces from recognizing and mounting an effective counterattack. Catching the Iraqis deployed to fight along the wrong axis of battle had given American forces an insurmountable advantage. Iraqi positions simply could not have defeated the surprise attack, deployed defensively as they were. But had E-Troop obeyed orders and not advanced past the 70 Easting, those same forces could have repositioned and regrouped, presenting a much more formidable challenge that could have seen them inflict more serious casualties on the Americans. The Battle of 73 Easting would have major repercussions around the world, with more militaries adopting a less centralized command structure, though traditionally conservative nations such as Russia and China still struggle to lend their junior officers the flexibility that is so obviously critical to success on the fast-paced modern battlefield. The battle and stunning outcome of American advances against Iraqi forces, who were at the time the world's 4th most formidable military, along with the results achieved by American weapons and equipment, also led Soviet observers at the time to declare that the only way to stop an American armored advance would be to use tactical nuclear weapons. It also proved that the decay of America's military brought on by the Vietnam War had been fully reversed, and that it now fielded a professional and competent military that persists to this day. Do you think the Republican Guard forces could have stood a chance if they hadn't been surprised by Americans? What was the real reason for America's stunning victory? Superior vehicles, command doctrine, or luck? Let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, USA versus the World. Who would win? Thanks for watching, and as always, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.